Things to know about anorexia in 6 questions. The first question: is anorexia common in children? Studies show that 1 in 3 parents describe their child as no appetite. First of all, it is important to clearly explain what the concept of anorexia means for the family. Question 2. In what situations do children who are thought to have an appetite apply to you? Are hunger and appetite the same concept? Hunger is the desire to eat food to satisfy physiological needs. On the other hand, appetite is the desire to eat, which is believed to arise with the desire to learn and repeat the pleasant taste experienced and the satisfaction it provides, which also has a psychological basis. Since appetite is experienced and perceived quite differently between individuals, maternal perception on this issue must be fully disclosed. Even normal situations can sometimes be seen as abnormal by mothers whose strongest impulse is to feed their babies. In addition to problems with organs and body systems, which we call organically, behavioral errors and psychological difficulties sometimes may lie in anorexia. Therefore, anorexia is a complaint that requires a multidimensional evaluation. The third question: how is the first intervention done for children who complain of anorexia? First, a thorough physical examination is necessary so that we can determine if there is a developmental delay. After examining all organ systems and evaluating possible disease outcomes, we order laboratory tests if necessary. In addition, it is necessary to determine whether there is a real loss of appetite. If the mother is concerned, she may have difficulty feeding, but this can also indicate other situations besides loss of appetite. For this reason, we require mothers to take a minimum of 3 days of nutrition diary and check the appropriateness of calories, nutritional contents and quantities. Things to know about anorexia in 6 questions. Fourth question: what are the diseases that cause loss of appetite? There may be some diseases that we define as organic disorders due to anorexia. The most common conditions we see are iron, zinc, folic acid, and vitamin B12 deficiency, which sometimes led to anemia. Leaks from the stomach into the esophagus that we call gastroesophageal reflux disease are gastrointestinal diseases, food allergies, gastritis, constipation, microbial or non-microbial diseases of the gut, parasitic diseases, many chronic diseases, and autism. And sometimes cancer-like diseases can be accompanied by complaints of loss of appetite. In addition, it can adversely affect appetite in conditions such as swallowing disorders due to neurological or motor retardation, and gastric emptying disorders. After the diagnosis is made, treatment of the cause is applied. All-inclusive overwater villa vacation in Maldives, visa-free. Club Med with 70 years experience. Question 4. Should every child with anorexia be seen by a doctor? Yes, without a doubt. It is necessary to establish that the diseases or deficiencies just mentioned do not exist, and to start treatment if any. Although it may seem simple, sometimes it can be a warning of a serious condition. The fifth question: is there a loss of appetite even without the disease? If so, how is this determined? What tests are performed? There are also periods that are seen as anorexia which we see without illness or deficiency and which we know are normal. For example, one such period is the period between the age of 1 to 2 years, during which the growth of the child slows down and the need for nutrients decreases, the amount of food intake decreases, and sometimes accompanied by fear of tasting new food. At the age of 3 to 5, the group that eats some foods that we call less selective, the whiner eater, and does not taste some at all, and sometimes can be dominated by feelings such as stubbornness, anger and anxiety, actually makes up a large part of those who present to us for anorexia. On the other hand, some children can achieve adequate growth with fewer nutrients than their parents expected due to their genetic makeup. Thus, we regularly monitor our children and keep track of their calorie intake and growth rate. The content of the meal depending on the age of the child. We determine the number and quantity of food and control whether these quantities provide development. We determine which substitutes can replace food we do not consume. We increase the calories in the food and enrich its contents by obtaining the support of a dietitian when necessary. If growth and development are affected, we can support it with nutritional products for medicinal purposes. Sixth question: what do you advise families? My first suggestion is to be patient because solving feeding problems takes patience and time. Responsive feeding will make our work easier. It is very important to stop feeding and feeding from being a stressful and annoying activity, and to sit at the table together since childhood to determine feeding times and nutritional contents, but leave the quantity to the child. Children should be allowed to feed themselves from early childhood and should not be insisted upon when they show signs of being full. Things to know about anorexia in 6 questions. Children learn through modeling and vision. It may be easier for the parents to eat healthy foods, consume healthy foods in front of the child, involve the child in the food preparation process, and try foods that the child does not want in different forms and time again by putting some time in between. We should not forget that eating snacks and fast food in preschool age will reduce appetite. In this period, it is appropriate to make a feeding plan such as 3 main meals and 1 main meal, to remove the meal if you do not start eating within 15 minutes when placed on the table, so that it does not exceed 20 to 25 minutes after starting to eat, and remove the food when this period is exceeded. Delays in transitioning to solid food, giving food in the form of slurry, choosing food by the family, feeding the child at a different time outside the family table and a toy or screen causes the development of malnutrition. Anorexia, which begins after age 1 and peaks at 18 to 24 months, can be caused by a fear of a new food. In this case, it is recommended that the family try to eat the rejected food at least 10 to 15 times in different times and forms. In addition, a varied diet for the mother from pregnancy onwards will make it easier for the baby to get used to different tastes. As the baby begins to learn about the foods that a breastfeeding mother eats with breast milk, it will be easier to accept these foods when the baby begins the complementary feeding process.